Welcome back to my channel. I thought we would do a video today on how to paint a droid for the Star Wars universe. So I thought I would start with this head right here. This is a head I designed a little while back. It is the head of the droid that had 8 arms in A New Hope that was being sold with R2-D2 and C-3PO. And I always liked the design of this head. I thought it was interesting. I always wanted to model it and I wanted to print it, and now I have. So it's been sitting around here for a while and I want to paint it. I thought this would be a great opportunity to show my process of painting, weathering, kind of making it look like it's dirty and lived in and, kind of been from that Star Wars universe. And you can apply the techniques I'm going to show on this thing to kind of anything where you kind of really want to make it look old and worn and kind of worn out. And I'm going to kind of try to match it to the one that was used in the film. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the bot from the droid sale scene. As I was saying, I have always admired it, and after several iterations, I ended up printing it in resin on my Elegoo Jupiter. Okay, I've printed the entire head with resin. I'm using Elegoo's ABS-like resin for this project. I have the main body of the head, which is actually hollow, and I have an antenna as well as the 2 lenses that attach to the sides of the head and become the side parts. And then I made 2 lens covers for the main eye on both sides of the head. The center lens, or the actual glass part, is a 50mm cabochon. And I'm just using a wire inserted into this resin piece for the antenna. As this is a video on how to paint a droid for Star Wars, I thought I would just do a quick montage of all the sanding and prepping and fiddling and fidgeting that I had to do to get all these parts to fit together. Every one of these things could be their own video. I tend to show way too much sanding as I talk about this stuff, but I really want to get to the painting part and talk mainly about how do you actually paint something like this. So just know most of these parts need to be sanded, they need to be prepped, and they need to be primed. One thing I would like to note with resin prints is that there is typically some sort of support system that holds them up or holds them on to the print bed. So sometimes you'll get little dimples and little surface imperfections on the print, and I use spot and glazing putty to fill those imperfections. Most of the time the imperfections are quite small and you don't have to really do a lot. But on a heavier piece like this, you do need heavier supports, so you'll likely have to fill in something. As I mentioned, the part's hollow. This makes the part a little bit lighter, and as a result, you have to put a hole in the part to allow the resin to drain out of it. This hole has to be filled in, and in this case, I used a 2-part epoxy to fill the gap. I used my vacuum form machine to make the lens for the side pieces, or the side eyes, and I just used an existing buck that I had laying around and cut the lenses to size. Once cut, I just sanded the back of them to diffuse them. Once again, we sand, this time just to make the whole part smooth, and then we prime. Once primed, we then paint, and I used a rattle can for this. The white is Malta White from Montana Paints. This droid is primarily black and white with aluminum parts and then orange as an accent color. I'm using Malta White, which is a off-white, almost really light beige or cream color. For all the black areas on this droid, I'm using a matte black acrylic paint. You could use an airbrush to paint all the black on, but that would require, a lot of masking, and really with matte black, it really hides so many things. You're not really going to see any brush strokes, you're not going to see any of that stuff, not to mention all the weathering and chipping and things of that nature that we're going to do on top of this. So for me, it's easier just to pick up a brush and paint, those black areas very quickly. With the base colors on, it was time to glue this thing together. Started with the small lenses, glued those in, then glued the antenna into place. Used a little bit of glue to attach the cabochons, or the glass lenses, into the housing, and then glued the housing to the main head. Lastly, I glued the side lenses into place. Of course, I needed to have this thing sit on an actual neck, so I quickly mocked up a topper or top of the neck part, painted it orange, and made it so it fit the Treadwell neck that I made for my last video. This piece here is a 3/4 inch Schedule 40 irrigation pipe connector. And I needed a connector between the neck and the head that was the right size. So I'm using this 3/4 inch piece of plastic pipe, and I painted it an aluminum color with the rattle can. I am now using a brush, a fairly messed up brush, and I stippled on a copper color over the aluminum color, and I'm now using a black steel color over the top of the copper color. These are all the Vallejo metallics, which are really nice. They're very translucent and they layer really beautifully, really can create a nice metal effect. And once I got done with the copper and then the black, I then went in with some blue, and this is a blue metallic, almost gunmetal type color. And then finally, my last color was a rust color. To detail paint, you're going to need a variety of colors. I typically use acrylic paints. You can use oil and enamel paints. And for today, and for this droid here, I'm going to do a series of washes and then do some small details like chipped paint and exposed metal and things of this nature. But to start things up, I'm going to do a wash of dirt, basically. It's going to be a tan color. I mix my paint roughly to a ratio of 5 parts water, 1 part paint. It's not an exact science. It is really by eye, and you can see just how drippy and how far the paint will actually go. And the idea is that you just want the paint to kind of stain or fill in the cracks and fill in the crevices of your model. In this particular case, I want it to look like the droid has been out in the sun and has been out in the sand. You know, this was on a desert planet, so the droid should have sand in every bit and place that you could think of. And I just kind of want to show the effects of that. You can also use water to thin things out. So if things are starting to dry up too fast for you, you can just take a little spray bottle with some water on it and spray it down. You really, the paint doesn't dry too fast with this process, so you do have a little bit of time to kind of wipe it off and rub it in and kind of expose what you want to expose. I'm a little bit messy with this first layer, actually, because I kind of want the whole thing to be really, really dirty to begin with. Once you've got that initial dirt layer on, then you can start to add darker colors. In this particular case, I'm going to go right in with some black and start to really make it look a little bit oily, a little bit more dirty and grimy. I want it to look like the droid has had the oil or the grease rubbed off of it or rubbed on it, cleaned off of it, if you will. And darker colors will just get things to stand out a little bit more than, say, a lighter color. But the lighter colors and the darker colors together really, really do a nice job of giving it multi-layers. And really, the more colors, the more layers you do, the better. And if you're feeling nervous at all, do a light layer, and then come back and do another layer, and add more and add more and add more until you feel really comfortable with your weathering. And there's not really, I honestly don't think there's you can really do this in a wrong way. Just applying it and basically patting it off and allowing some streaks to remain and drip down the model, allow the dark colors to get into the crevices and cracks. It just really adds a layer of realism to the droid. And I get it everywhere. I'm getting it on the lenses. I'm working it pretty much all over this droid. I really want it to look like this has been really been abused over time. It's really old looking, and this black color is really going to make things stand out. You could also use a little bit of green in your black, to give it a little bit more of an oily look. If you wanted a little more fresh, oily look, you could do that as well. There's really no limit to the washes And typically, I'll do 2 or 3 washes on something like this just to kind of get a nice patina to the surface and to get some drips and some spots and really get it to look like it's been old and worn out. Next up is to start to chip the corners and the edges. I'm using a enamel silver paint. You could use an acrylic paint. I've used spray paint for this actually, by spraying into a cup and then dipping my brush into it and using it on the edges of things like I'm doing here. That works very, very well. You could also do this before the weathering. So there's no rule that you have to do the weathering first or the washes first and then do this kind of detail last. I'm just doing it that way for this particular droid, but I've done it both ways. So you could do this kind of detailing on the droid first and then go back and add your washes on top of it. I'm only using an aluminum color for this particular droid because I don't think it's necessary, or I don't think that would match the droid was in the film. So I'm only using the aluminum color, but you could go in with some copper colors. You could go in with some, other metal colors. You could even do some rust on this if you wanted. But basically, I'm taking the brush and I'm wiping off as much of the paint as possible, and then coming in and kind of scratching at the surface. And in some cases, I'm leaving little chips of paint, or what looks like where the paint has been chipped away. And in some cases, I'm making it look like the surface has been scratched. Of course, I need to make a move, right? So I attached a motor to the neck, and then the motor is via a shaft is attached to the bottom of the head, and the head will spin freely of the neck. And basically it's all wired into that base I made for the other video, and there you have it. Let me know in the comments if you think I should build the rest of this thing. It would be another big project, but it might be fun. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.